No collusion with Russia and insufficient evidence of obstructing justice. Donald Trump says the Mueller investigation completely exonerates him. But does it really? And will the full report be released? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. It's been the biggest question for Donald Trump during his U.S. presidency so far. Did he conspire with Russians to help get elected? No, he didn't, is the result of the 2-year investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. But investigators can't give a definitive answer on whether the president obstructed justice or not. Trump was quick to tweet, "No collusion, no obstruction, complete and total exoneration. Keep America great." But leading Democrats say the summary of the report by Attorney General William Barr raises as many questions as it answers. They're demanding full access to what else the report says. Patty Culhane reports from Washington.
It's the investigation U.S. President Donald Trump has long condemned as a witch hunt until it was released. And now the president is cheering the findings.
There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration.
That's not completely true. The Attorney General says there is no evidence the Trump campaign coordinated with Russian officials, but on obstruction of justice, the Special Counsel Robert Mueller didn't decide if he should be charged. The Attorney General made that call. And in his letter to Congress, he made clear this report doesn't find the president didn't possibly commit a crime, writing, "The special counsel states that while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him." And that is Democrats demanding answers. Jerry Nadler heads the committee in Congress that will be investigating.
Attorney General Barr, who auditioned for his role with an open memorandum suggesting that the obstruction investigation was unconscionable, and that it was almost impossible for any president to commit obstruction of justice since he is the head of the executive branch, made a decision about that evidence in under 48 hours. His conclusions raise more questions than the answer, given the fact that Mueller uncovered evidence that, in his own words, does not exonerate the president.
He's promising to call officials to testify and vowing to get the tens of thousands of pages of evidence that have been collected. The Trump campaign was quick to try and use this to bolster his chances of re-election, releasing this video.
Evidence is pretty clear that there was collusion.
The president's proclaiming victory, but as Congress pushes to make all the evidence public, and with several other investigations ongoing, he may want his supporters to believe it's over. It isn't. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, during his 22-month investigation, Mueller brought charges against 34 people, including former Trump aides who pleaded guilty mainly to lying to the FBI, fraud, and obstructing justice. The list includes Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor, former deputy campaign manager Rick Gates, George Papadopoulos, foreign policy advisor, a former lawyer Michael Cohen, and Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman. Awaiting trial in November is Roger Stone. Trump's old friend and advisor has pleaded not guilty to lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering. That's connected to the WikiLeaks emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign. And 25 Russians working for either intelligence or internet agencies are also charged, in addition to a Russian aide to Paul Manafort. Well, let's bring in our panel now to talk more about this. In Washington, D.C., we have J.D. Gordon. He was the National Security Director on Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. He was also interviewed about alleged collusion as part of the Mueller investigation. In New York, we have Jeannie Zaino. She is a political scientist and professor at Iona College. And joining us from Washington as well via Skype, we have David Goodfriend, a lawyer who previously served as the Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton. Good to have you all with us. So, J.D. Gordon, let me start with you. The Special Counsel Robert Mueller did not find President Donald Trump was guilty of obstruction of justice, but he didn't find him innocent either. So isn't all of this celebrating from people on the Trump side a little premature at this point?
Well, I don't really think there's anything to celebrate. I mean, here you have a stealth coup attempt to remove a president who was elected by the American people. You have dozens of people who have had their lives shattered, including me. I was the director of national security for the Trump campaign. I was interviewed before 3 congressional committees and the special counsel multiple times. I had to spend 5-figure legal bills to defend myself. So I did nothing wrong. I wasn't accused of doing anything wrong, but yet I was maligned on CNN and MSNBC and international media for the past 2 years. This has been a crime wave of defamation against the president and people who were close to him, and people who were not even close to him, frankly. Some of the advisors on the campaign, for instance, Carter Page and others were maligned and did nothing wrong. So this is a tragedy for the United States. As Glenn Greenwald was saying on the radio this morning, one of the world's most prestigious progressive journalists, he said the whole Trump-Russia issue was a scam and a fraud based on conspiracy theories that were idiotic and moronic. Well said to Glenn Greenwald. I couldn't agree with him more.
Can I ask you, though, J.D. Gordon, about the questioning as part of the investigation that you took part in with the Mueller team? I'm not going to get into the contents of all of it, but what was your overall impression of it? The impartiality, the lack of impartiality, was it handled fairly from your point of view?
Well, I was interviewed by 6 different prosecutors and agents and analysts since 2017 over multiple times. And I would say that 5 out of 6 were collegial and professional. 1 was not. However, what I told them is they've attempted to turn the entire campaign into a crime scene. And that's what they did. With every email or every communication you could possibly imagine. They brought in 500 witnesses. They issued over 300 orders for communications. They had so many subpoenas to people who had to get lawyers to defend themselves, because once the FBI is investigating a campaign of which you were a part, you don't know where it's going to lead. So several people were really shaken down. I think it was a shakedown of so many people. People are going to jail or are in jail, have been in jail for nothing to do with collusion with Russia, which was the stated purpose for these investigations. This was a shakedown and a political scandal like we've never seen in this country before. I hope it never happens again, but in order to do that, we have to hold people accountable who started this investigation and these witch hunts in the first place.
But was President Trump right to spend 2 years trashing the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt and a hoax and fake news, and tweeting about it over 100 times? As he did, because his critics would say if he was innocent, if he had nothing to hide, he certainly wasn't acting like it.
Of course he was right to do it, because it was an illegal attempt to remove him from office. Now, that said, it didn't just come out of the blue. In 2016, after the elections, Hope Hicks, who was his chief spokeswoman, told the media that there were no contacts during the campaign with any foreign entities. Well, that was just false. She shouldn't have said that. But she was a communications director who was in her mid-20s. She basically did a lot of us a great disservice, including the president.
David Goodfriend, for months we've been hearing from prominent Democrats and critics of President Trump that let the Mueller investigation play out in Mueller we trust and all the rest of it, and we'll take it from now. Now, according to the summary of the report, the president did not collude with Russia. So where did Democrats go from here?
First, I need to respond to some of the comments that we just heard. Listen, I have a lot of friends from when I worked in the Clinton White House who also had to hire lawyers, who also had to spend money and time and effort defending themselves. And not once do I recall hearing anybody from the Republican Party saying that that was inappropriate. I think it was perfectly appropriate for the special counsel in that case and the special counsel in this case to do a thorough, dispassionate, objective, careful investigation. And I'm really sorry that there are some people who had to spend money on lawyers, just as I'm really sorry that some of my friends in the Clinton White House had to spend money on lawyers. That's too bad. That's part of our system. It's how it works. And the fact that we have over 30, let me repeat, over 30 indictments with convictions at a criminal level of some of the highest ranking people in the Trump organization means this was not a witch hunt. There were real crimes committed, real bad deeds done, and there's real consequences for that. Now, the report says they did not find collusion with Russia. Well, guess what? Starr didn't find anything wrong with Whitewater, but he found Monica Lewinsky. Again, too bad. These are real wrongdoings that real people did, and they are suffering the consequences. If there is any question as to whether or not this report is accurate, let's see the report. In fact, we need transparency. Let's see not only the entire text of the report, but all supporting documents, all the interviews, all the emails, everything that was collected, so that the country can see this was indeed a thorough, dispassionate, and real investigation. I think the more light we shine on this, the better. When you get secrecy, when you get cloak and dagger hiding and lying and all kinds of obfuscation, that's when people's suspicions are raised. You want to have a clean slate, let's get it out there. And frankly, I don't think the courts or an impeachment proceeding are the right place to handle this. I think the American voters can make a very adult decision next year after they've seen all the facts as to whether or not they want to reelect this man as their president.
But I want to ask you, though, David Goodfriend, despite the fact that that the conclusion here is the president and his team did not collude with Russia, or at least the president did not collude with Russia. We have the head of the Judiciary Committee, the Democratic-controlled Judiciary Committee, saying that he wants to pursue this further and that he's not satisfied with what's come out so far. What do you say to those who argue that the Democrats that this is just a fishing expedition here and this needs to be put to bed?
Well, I say that's wrong. What Congress does in its oversight role is oversee. You have a cabinet level official, the Attorney General, and a Deputy Attorney General who within less than 48 hours of receiving the report decided that on the issue of obstruction of justice, the second issue that was investigated here, both collusion and obstruction. On the issue of obstruction, they said, even though the Mueller report said they were not exonerating the president and not coming to a conclusion, they, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, decided not to pursue it. Well, let's understand the reasoning behind that decision. That's perfectly kosher for a congressional committee to ask. They can bring up the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General under oath in front of the committee and ask, how is it that within less than 48 hours of receiving this multi-hundred-page report, you immediately came to the conclusion that there was no room for an obstruction of justice claim? Let's understand your reasoning and have it out. And again, transparent, open, in the light of day, everyone can see. Let's hear their reasoning loud and clear. And perhaps at that point, everybody says, okay, well, that makes sense. You made a reasoned judgment. I will point out, however, that the special counsel referred this case to multiple U.S. attorneys' offices and that you have multiple attorneys general throughout the United States still investigating the president. This is not the end, but I think if we learned anything, it is that keeping things in darkness and in secrecy is a bad idea. We should have it out in the open. We should release the full text of the report. We should release all the documents that were collected. I mean, these are taxpayer dollars we spent doing this investigation. Let's see what our money paid for. And the more that's out in the open, the better.
All right, Jeannie, Zaino, let's get your take on this. I mean, as we said, this is being seen as a significant victory for President Trump, and some would say lifted the cloud that's been hanging over his presidency. But are there other questions that remain unanswered for you?
There are. I mean, we need to be clear. It was probably close to a best-case scenario for the president this weekend, except for the fact that, and again, we have not seen the report, so we're going on this based on what Barr has said, except for the fact that Mueller did not come to a conclusion. He sort of kicked the can down the road on this issue of obstruction. So we do need to see the full report, because let's not forget, Barr famously, before he even went before the Senate committee in terms of his nomination and confirmation, had made it very clear, for what many lawyers think is very odd reasoning, that the president simply could not obstruct justice. So that was a foregone conclusion for Barr. And within less than 48 hours after getting the Mueller report, in some very, what we think would be, very difficult circumstances, he comes to that conclusion again. So we do need to see the full full report in order to understand what Mueller found. That said, we can't deny that this was, except for the obstruction issue, the best case scenario for the president. He didn't see his son, he didn't see his son-in-law or others close up and higher ups in the campaign indicted. That was very good news for him. But I think we need to take a step back here and remember what Mueller did find that everybody agrees with. And that is the fact that Russia meddled in the 2016 presidential election in the United States. We had over 20 indictments. We still have over 20 indictments on that front. Now, he did not find that anybody in the Trump campaign conspired with the Russians, but he does find there were many attempts to reach out to the campaign, and indeed contact was made. Again, they didn't conspire, but there was meddling in the campaign. We are a year and a half from the 2020 campaign, and as somebody who deals with election administrators all the time, I can tell you nothing in this country of substance has been done to address this issue. We are still as vulnerable and insecure today as we were in 2016. And if there's anything that comes out of this investigation, it should be that we need to do a better job of securing our elections before 2020. We have a federal system. These are 50 separate elections in 50 states, and these election administrators, they need the money and the support and the know-how to secure these elections, because this is a huge problem in the United States and remains so.
All right, we'll put some of that back to J.D. Gordon in a moment, but I just want to come back to what you said earlier, Jeannie, Zaino, that about the full report, the need for the full report to be released. That is something that at the moment is largely up to Attorney General William Barr. What is your take on how he's handled this so far? Can he be trusted to handle this objectively and not be influenced by politics? Because he has said that he will release as much of it as he can within the law.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bill Barr has handled this well so far. It is a little bit, again, I think, going to raise suspicion, which is what we are trying to fight against, that this was done so quickly in 48 hours, the obstruction conclusion. That said, he is going to go over the report with a fine-tooth comb, remove anything, for instance, the grand jury testimony that cannot be released, and release the report. We need to see that happen. I do think anything not released, we will see a court fight, and we will see an attempt, and I think ultimately the release of most of this report. That is what, let's not forget, the president asked for, the administration asked for, Republicans and Democrats in the House all asked for. So this is something that the American public deserves to see. And we also need to remember the whole reason for this investigation was to assure the American people that they can have confidence in our system, our election system, the outcome, and there would be a thorough investigation. To not release the report, again, accepting anything that damages national security or ongoing investigations, as we know, I'm in the Southern District, as are going on now. Anything accepting that, we need to see the full report. And I do think we will. And I think Bill Barr will try, at least as far as we know his reputation, to do that. And we're going to have both, I hope, Republicans and Democrats in Congress push for that sooner rather than later.
All right. J.D. Gordon, what about releasing the full report then? If nobody did anything wrong here, what's wrong with releasing the whole thing? And is it, if, as you said earlier, President Trump was legitimately elected by the American people, what's wrong with letting the American people decide for themselves and see all of the evidence laid out before them?
Well, the problem with that is about 500 people were interviewed by the special counsel, and if you see the whole report, you're going to see all 500. So what will happen is the media will pick through all 500 and try to defame each one. And we'll try to say, this person did that, this person may have done that. Look, I've been defamed for the past several years now by CNN and MSNBC. They kept putting my picture on the screen constantly to say I had secret contacts with the Russians. And when you peel the onion back, they're talking about a handshake with the Russian ambassador in a group of 50 ambassadors at the RNC National Convention in Cleveland in July 2016, where I was a guest speaker at a U.S. State Department program for over 50 foreign ambassadors. I shook all their hands because that was my job. And later on, at an evening reception, I ate chicken satays with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, and a few other ambassadors in a small group for a few minutes. but the mainstream media in the United States labeled it as J.D. Gordon had 2 secret meetings with the Russian ambassador. It's entirely false. I don't know why anybody would want to watch CNN or MSNBC again, because they lied to the American people. They misled people on a daily basis. That's why people think the way they do.
All right, the media's role in all of this is a subject for another discussion. But as far as the report itself, as Jeannie Zaino said, there's a lot of evidence that's been uncovered that shows the Russians did something. The Russians tried to influence this election. As an American, isn't that something that concerns you, regardless of what party you're from, regardless of which candidate you support?
Well, absolutely. The Russians certainly did meddle in the election. It was horrific. But there already have been reports released about it. The House Intelligence Committee released a report that talked about it last year, and they said there was no evidence of collusion. Wow, what a surprise. We already knew this for at least a year from the House Intelligence Committee. So I think this is a canard. It's a sham. It's a fraud. And getting back to what David Goodfriend had mentioned, I'm surprised he didn't say that the Clinton investigation was a witch hunt. I think it was a witch hunt, too, and it's reprehensible that it happened. But my message for David is 2 wrongs don't make a right.
But 35 people indicted doesn't sound like a witch hunt, does it?
Well, most of those people were Russians who will never see the inside of a courtroom. As far as the 6 Trump associates
Americans
who have been indicted,
like the chairman of the president's campaign.
I'm talking about. Yeah, I know. Well, he had business dealings with Ukrainians that he was caught because he didn't pay his taxes. He didn't register as a foreign agent. So I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been punished in some way. I'm saying that it had nothing to do with collusion. The whole narrative, which was a false narrative, said that the Trump campaign and President Trump colluded with the Russians by rumor and innuendo. So yeah, 6 Trump associates were indicted, but those were for things that were process crimes that they were strong-armed into getting tripped up for perjury traps in some cases, like General Flynn and George Papadopoulos. Roger Stone appears to be in that same boat. His trial is later this year. But the other 3 will go to prison for other things, financial crimes and for tax evasion. Nothing to do with collusion, which was the stated reason for the investigation.
David Goodfriend, how do you respond to that?
Papadopoulos started all of this by mistakenly telling an Australian spy about conversations between the campaign and the Russians. That's what started this. The Australian intelligence agency then transferred that information to the U.S. intelligence agencies, and that is what I believe George Papadopoulos was caught lying about under oath, and that's why he was convicted of perjury. These are not unrelated strands. These are all quite related to the underlying issue. And by the way, I agree with you that lots of people are now saying that our intelligence agencies agree there was Russian meddling in the campaign. That seems to be a given fact. Why is it then that the only person who seemed to be disputing that was Donald Trump himself, who publicly stated that he didn't believe it was so, who publicly said that 17 U.S. intelligence agencies must be wrong because he, Donald Trump, was right, who insisted on a private, no press, no advisors meeting with Vladimir Putin around the same time? Look, you can say that the special counsel didn't find collusion, and that certainly is true. But I think the issue is transparency here. When you have a president who's clearly trying to not be forthcoming in the facts, this is what you get. That's why I think the best antidote to this whole situation is full disclosure. Get the report out, get the notes and the underlying documents out. And yes, you may have to say that was me with a bunch of other ambassadors, but that's what we call transparency. That's giving the American public the full picture so that next year, when they go to the polls, they can make an informed decision about whether or not to reelect Donald Trump.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Great discussion. We could certainly spend a lot longer talking about this, but unfortunately, we are out of time. J.D. Gordon, Jeannie Zaino, and David Goodfriend, thanks very much for being with us. And thank you for watching. As always, you can see this program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, you go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.